Okay. Today we have John McIntyre as our presenter. John McIntyre is an extension master gardener who focuses on a range of sustainable landscape best practices, including water-wise gardening, permaculture, and controlling mosquitoes and ticks without pesticides. She is a frequent presenter at our public education programs and regularly shares her knowledge with friends and neighbors. With that, I am turning the presentation over to John.
Morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. Just a quick brief overview for those that aren't familiar with the Master Gardeners of Northern Virginia. We're part of the Virginia Cooperative Extension. We're trained volunteers. We've got extensive knowledge on gardening practices and best practices, particularly focused on sustainability. We offer a lot of public education programs, including, as Cheryl already mentioned, we have our help desk, which people can call in with their questions related to anything they grow, as well as questions about pests that they might be encountering. We have similar services through our plant clinics. Mostly they're associated with farmers markets. We hold these public education programs, and we have a number of demonstration gardens where you can actually come and look and see some of the best practices and get ideas and things you can do in your own garden. I would encourage everybody to check out our website. It's just a wealth of knowledge on issues related to gardening, inspiring, just a host and lots of resources, fact sheets on native plants, suggestions on best plants for different uses, and actually all of the materials that we'll be talking about today are also available through our website in the resources section. And in general, if you're looking for good information on the website, if you use a site:/edu or a site:/gov, you're going to get authoritative information on the topics that you're looking for. Just also want to highlight the Arlington Regional Master Naturalist for our programs on mosquito and ticks. They're our partners. They have chapters again across Virginia. They are again trained volunteers. They work in our natural areas as volunteers, as education, citizen scientists, and stewards, helping to maintain the natural resources in our parks and in other natural areas. It's another good opportunity, good program in the community. So anyway, today we're going to be looking at mosquitoes and ticks. We'll walk through the basic life cycles for each, and so that you can understand what strategies are most effective in terms of controlling them, and most importantly, protecting yourself. So why is this important? Well, we obviously want to enjoy the outdoors. Mosquitoes and ticks are certainly pests that we would like to avoid. And they are a vector of disease in some cases. So kind of understanding, what their life cycle is a good way of understanding how we can control it and how you can protect yourself. But also more as importantly is actually looking at how we see this in terms of protecting native pollinators and beneficial insects, and talking about how the use of really indiscriminate, non-selective pesticides are probably more damaging than they are effective against controlling mosquito and ticks. Again, mostly we want people to enjoy the outdoors. So we'll start with mosquitoes. There are over 3,000 species worldwide. In Virginia, there's about 40 different species in different habitats. They are largely aquatic. They begin, most of their life cycle is actually in or near stagnant water. It's only the adult female that actually bites, and they actually go for any humans and other invertebrates, and we're not necessarily their main target. It's just coincidental, whatever warm-blooded animal happens to be around. They are going to be active usually when the temperature gets over 50 degrees. So of course we're right into that movement now that it's expected to get up to the 90s over the weekend. And they can live 2 to 3 months, and with the female adult hibernating overnight over winter for about 6 to 8 months. There are two basically different families of mosquitoes that are most common around here. One are the Culex mosquitoes. These are small brown. They're the kind of mosquitoes you actually don't notice until after you've already bitten. They actually spend most of their time up in the trees, and they do prefer birds, but again, they will bite people and other mammals. Keep in mind they can have a range of up to a half a mile to 2 miles, and so that they lay eggs in stagnant water, storm drains, clogged gutters, and sites with standing water. And they can spread some disease associated mainly with West Nile virus. The Asian tiger mosquito, this is kind of the real nuisance mosquitoes. They are most active during the day. The Culex mosquito, in fact, is more active during dawn and dusk. And these are the ones that you're actually going to notice. Again, they can be a carrier to transmit. Not all mosquitoes are going to transmit these diseases, but it is possible in some cases. And they breed, again, small and large containers, small holes. Again, stagnant water is where they're attractive. And then you have their essentially cousin of what's referred to as the yellow fever mosquito. And it's larger than its cousin. And again, transmitter of many of the same types of diseases. So the basic life cycle is the female actually mates prior to going into hibernation over the winter. And then they will, once they emerge, as the temperatures get above 50 degrees pretty consistently. As I said, almost females need a meal before they can lay their egg. And they will lay the eggs in stagnant water. It takes about 7 to 10 days for those to go through the larval life cycle stages before emerging as an adult. And then again, once they emerge as adult, it kind of repeats that process of mating and laying eggs. And there can be several generations during out the summer, particularly as we're getting years where warm weather tends to extend further into the year. So key thing to keep in mind is the breeding habitats, both human-made and natural, but particularly in our urban environments, there's a lot of areas where stagnant water can collect that we have to be aware of. And particularly it's stagnant water that tends to be temporary, because once you have a permanent body like a pond, you're going to start to attract things like dragonflies and other critters that will actually feed on the larvae, so help with the natural control. So again, kind of looking in your yard, there's just lots of places that water can actually accumulate. Any type of holes, you get tire swing, the children's toys, fountains, bird baths, anything. It really only takes about a tablespoon of water in which for them to bring. Think of tarps, clogged gutters, a couple other, kind of the saucers that you have with plants. If you don't, those usually aren't necessary. A couple of years ago, I looked at them and said, why do I need them? So I just took them out. These type of perforated pipes that we use for drainage is a cure kind of thing. Water collect at the top areas. You can always poke holes in them to keep them from draining. Keep in mind that children's pools, any drainage areas where the water might actually be standing for a while, are areas to kind of keep in mind that where the mosquitoes are likely to breed. So there are a lot of ways of controlling mosquito, and there's going to be most effective at the larval stage. And we'll walk through most of these ways that you can actually control mosquitoes most effectively. So we'll start with biological controls. If you happen to have a pond, if you fish, mosquito fish, and other small type fish are actually going to feed on the mosquitoes and help keep them under control. Dragonflies, toads, water striders, ground beetles, midges are all different types of insects that actually will feed on the larvae. So, again, but that's a pond that's going to be water that's there consistently. But if you have standing water which is more likely the case, and you can't actually dump that water out, then you might look to use BTI, which is a larvicide. It's actually very much targeted towards the larvae of mosquitoes and a couple of types of fly species. So it doesn't do any damage to fish. It won't damage any other types of insects. So, but again, it's targeted towards the very early stages of development. But you just put the dunks, and they have both the kind of donut-sized ones, and then they have the bits into the water it could stand with. This is a very effective way of dealing with mosquitoes if you can't eliminate the standing water. And in fact, Doug Ptolemy, who is a very strong advocate for native plants and protecting pollinators, suggests that you might actually, especially if you can get some neighbors to cooperate, is actually kind of create traps of pails or containers with some water in it, maybe a little bit of leaves or something, to create the conditions they want. And then you put in the dunks or the bits, and that way you would trap it. Kind of that goes at the same time of making sure that you're eliminating all of the other standing water areas. And then you can protect yourself. And that's a good strategy of doing that if you're wearing long sleeves, long pants, just kind of covering as much of your skin as you can or what's comfortable. Nets, screens on back porches are all ways of kind of helping. But most effectively and probably most useful and practical is actually repellents, that they are and can be extremely effective. DEET using 20 to 30% picaridin, 20%, and oil of eucalyptus. Now, oil of eucalyptus is the only natural product if people are thinking about that. And then there's the ERC 3535, which is the skin soft type products. A good way of actually kind of assessing what repellents are most effective is to check in with consumer reports. They usually do an annual assessment, and they'll look specifically in terms of, is it a spray, is it a cream? And they do very effective testing, and they also do test other products being sold as mosquito repellents. Usually those are ones that with some degree of garlic oil, rosemary oil, or other kind of natural herbicidal or herbal products that, and those actually don't tend to test fairly well. They actually will evaporate into the air fairly quickly, so that they don't last as long as some of these other products. But again, you're checking out with consumer reports and see what they say is just a good way of identifying which of these products are going to be most effective. So I will stop now for questions. Have covered a lot of material. So
we have several questions. Water gardens with moving water a host for breeding mosquitoes?
No, if the water's moving, the mosquitoes won't actually be breeding in there. So that's, and again, if you have a bird bath or something with water that is there permanently, you could get a bubbler as well, which is an effective way of keeping mosquitoes from breeding.
Okay. Are mosquito BTIs and dunks safe for frogs and toads?
Yes, they're highly selective towards mosquito larvae and the larvae of certain types of flies.
Can you use them in brooks?
In brooks?
Yes.
You can, but it probably isn't necessary because the brooks are going to be moving water, and they're also going to be permanent, mostly permanent, so that it will probably attract natural predators that will keep the population of mosquitoes under control.
And dunks safe for mammals, birds, and kids?
Well, I don't think that there's a problem for kids. I haven't heard anything like that. I mean, obviously you don't want to encourage them to eat or something, eat anything like that. But again, they're really very selectively targeted so that they haven't shown any problems for other mammals in that. So.
Okay, the next one is, can you use mosquito dunks in rain barrels, and is it safe to use that water for watering gardens?
Yes, you can use them in rain barrels. Ideally, if you have a really good screen that would keep out the mosquitoes, but putting in the dunks, what I would recommend doing is taking maybe the shoe part of a stocking, and putting the dunk in there, and then attaching it with twine or some rope. That way it makes it. You need to check them. They'll last a month or two, so you need to check them periodically to see if you need to replace them. In terms of watering with it would be safe to water. There are some recommendations in terms of using rain barrels for watering plants that you would be watering in a vegetable garden, but that doesn't have anything to do with whether or not you're using the dunks. It actually is concern of whether some of the runoff that would be coming from the roof would be picking up pathogens from birds or other animals. So there's just some concern that that's an issue.
What is the best way to destroy mosquito eggs if you see them? Do you pull them down or drain or throw them on the ground, whatever?
I think once you throw them down the ground and you get them out of water, they have to be in water to survive. So just dumping that water will eliminate the mosquito larvae. Again, if you just if you can't remove them, you can pull them out in some other manner or put some dunks in them.
Do you have a recommendation for a water bubbler that does not use too much electricity?
I haven't really researched that much. You'd have to look online to see what they have. There may actually be some solar power type products. At one point I bought a solar power fountain. So, you can kind of look into that in terms of as an option.
The next question is, if the mosquitoes not biting, if it's below 50 degrees, then what do they feed off?
Below 50 degrees, they'll be in hibernation. So they won't be active at all. I think the males may feed on the males actually don't bite. So to the extent that they eat, they have a fairly short life once they emerge, but they, more likely to feed on pollen.
The next question is, do native plants help deter mosquitoes?
Not necessarily. There's probably not much relationship between native plants and mosquitoes. Again, they're really are mostly part of our ecological system, so that there isn't generally much interaction between mosquitoes and plants. I do actually, after the last presentation I gave on this topic, we had somebody reach out and say that there's actually one mosquito out in the west that actually is important for pollinating a particular, might have been an orchid or something like that. So there are some types of relationships like that, but not really much known in this part of the country.
Where do mosquitoes hibernate? What kind of habitat?
They're usually going to hibernate like in tree barks.
Do they hibernate in leaf, mulch?
No, I think they're usually more up in the trees. And you've got like certain mosquito species like colics are certainly actually spending most of their life cycle up in trees. So they're less they're not known to be really hibernating in the leaves. It's more likely to be in and around trees.
Okay, I think that's it for this section.
Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about chemical mosquito control. And in some cases, local authorities will take steps to do kind of mosquito control. It's done at the local authorities, and it's usually driven by a health concern if they've spotted populations of mosquitoes that appear to be carrying particular diseases. And it's going to be very targeted at those areas where they're seeing mosquito breeding. And again, it's something that's should only really be used as a last resort. In our environments, people are actually, hiring companies to come out to actually spray for mosquitoes. And that's something that we'd like to make sure that we educate people on exactly what types of chemicals those companies are likely to be using. Now, the most common one that is used is pyrethroids. Well, it's assessed as having low toxicity for mammals and birds. It's highly toxic to fish, aquatics, and really non-target insects. and this is true for almost all the mosquito adulticides that are actually used for controlling mosquitoes, is that they are broad spectrum. They do not select for mosquitoes or specific species. Spraying indiscriminately is going to have a major impact on pollinators in particular, who are likely to be visiting those areas. They tend to, pyrethroids are a synthesized version of a chemical that is extracted from chrysanthemums. So sometimes that's often considered organic, but once it's been synthesized, so it actually lasts longer in the environment, lasts longer on the plants. But for mosquitoes, it's really only going to have an impact on the mosquito, primarily when it's been sprayed, directly touching them. And in some cases, like as I said, the Culex mosquitoes spend most of their time during the day up in trees. So the likelihood of actually, controlling much of that population, studies have shown is somewhat limited. So, and somebody had brought up the issue now, and I'll talk about is there is, increasingly companies talking about garlic oil or other natural products. I think rosemary oil I've seen, but mostly it tends to be from herbs, and it's the organic essential oil. They may have some limited degree of repellent properties and possibly even herbicidal areas. Again, these are not selected towards mosquitoes. Essentially, most of the testing that has been done suggests that they're not very effective, and would kind of point out to even the consumer reports assessment of products for repellents is that most of these products tend to do poorly in terms of protecting for any length of time on humans. So when companies are claiming that it's a natural product, and that it will control mosquitoes, what you want to do is ask to see the labeling and to see what else is in there, because most of these products have not been proven effective. They actually don't have to be proven effective. EPA has identified those products as being of very limited toxicity to humans, so that there's not need for any kind of really testing. So, again, be aware of those claims and checking out what, either it's not going to be terribly effective, or there's some other chemicals in there that are actually more likely to be controlling mosquitoes. If you're looking at hiring a pesticide applicator, you do want to know what they're actually planning to spray. You want to see, what the labels are for the chemicals that they're planning to use, but also use a licensed applicator from the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, because they have to meet certain training requirements, and that you're really not looking for somebody to just come and spray. You want somebody that's going to give you an integrated pest management plan, and that's really going to, inspect your yard, and will also be looking at ways of reducing breeding sites, and controlling mosquitoes, and not just relying on using the adulticide sprays. And get several proposals, check for quality over just the price, and then and make sure that they have the required license. And if you actually see any pesticide application that appears to be counter to what the rules are, you can report them to VDACs. They do take any pesticide misuse very seriously, and will research those issues. So, and a couple of things, again, if they're spraying, here's some things that you don't want to apply when pollinators are active, which is actually during a good part of the year. So you're really talking about dawn or dusk. You don't want them on food crops. You don't want them on flowering plants, because most of those chemicals are going to stay in the environment for several weeks at least, and it's more likely to have an impact on the pollinators visiting. If you're, windy days, the hottest part of days before rain, those are all, times where, you're either going to get more spread of the chemical beyond where they're just spraying, or of course the rain, it's just going to wash it away. So it's not necessarily going to be effective. And again, kind of reiterating, you can't actually remove. There are some plants that actually attract mosquitoes. Mainly, it's things like very dense coverings like ivy, where it creates a very moist, cool area that mosquitoes can get out of the sun. If it's spraying, it's not likely to get breach through that area and get at the mosquitoes that might be harboring there. Again, remove standing water, use the larvicides where you can. If you're outside, a fan is extremely effective for controlling mosquitoes. They're very weak flyers. It's a good way to be sitting on the porch, sitting on the patio. So again, kind of be as limited as possible in spraying and do it only during the cool parts of the day. There's lots of things that are sold. Bug zappers using Listerines. You can eat as much garlic as you want. It's not likely to keep the mosquitoes away. Wristbands, citronellas, bug zappers, propane diverted COT. Mosquitoes, are going to attract the mosquitoes, may not repel them. Bats, purple marlins, will eat mosquitoes. They don't necessarily prefer them. Good to have them around for lots of reasons. Check the labels, see what the active ingredient is. And it's important to really think about working with the neighbors. Mosquitoes do have a fairly large range of anywhere from 600 feet to 1 to 2 miles. That's usually much larger than the normal urban suburban lots. So, it's important to kind of talk to your neighbors, encourage your neighbors to also remove standing water. Just reminding us that the most common chemicals used to control mosquitoes are non-selective and are more likely to do damage to insects. We're seeing a sharp decline in insects, and insects are extremely important in the environment, that they're a key part of and a crucial part of the food chain that birds require, that other mammals feed on. So, we lose those insects, we're also disrupting the whole ecological system and undermining a lot of the important animals that we need for pollination, which are important for actually our food products. Mosquitoes do not like to breed in moving water. So if you have a bubbler or they don't, and they're weak flyers, so again, the fans are very effective. So, you can enjoy the outdoors. There's some easy things to take to protect yourself. And I will now kind of open it up to additional questions.
The first question is, these commercial companies that spray, they use garlic spray. So do they really work, the garlic spray?
Yeah. As I said, I don't think they, if they're working, you'd have to check the label to see whether it's just garlic oil or what else is in there. But there's actually no research that indicates that garlic oil or any of these other essential oils are actually effective. And the companies actually don't have to demonstrate that they are.
Can you take a 1,025 milligram garlic tablet every day to keep mosquitoes away?
It's not likely to be particularly effective at all. There's no evidence to prove that actually works. Again,
Okay.
Use a mosquito repellent on yourself. That's the most effective one.
The next question, I believe you already touched on it. Are there native plants or citronelle? They work as mosquito repellents.
Again, there's not a whole lot of evidence to indicate that they are. Many of those plants have some degree of repellent properties. They're nice to have around. They can work well as just a general deterrent in your garden, especially if you're mixing in with the other plants. If you're growing vegetables, might control somewhat, but they're not going to be very effective on mosquitoes. Again, I think actually using in the gardens are more just confuse the insects that are looking for the plants that they like to eat and rely on. So,
is there a fact or a myth? Are mosquitoes attracted to blue light?
Don't know about that one. It's probably more myth, but I can research and we can put out the answer on that on the website when we post the video.
Okay, the next question goes back to plants again. So this person wants to know does that mean lavender plants, lemongrass, citronelles are not effective as mosquito repellent on porch?
No, there's no real evidence that they are. Again, whatever effect they have is going to be very, very localized to the plant. You know, what they're emitting is something that very quickly disperses within the atmosphere.
Can you talk a little bit about English ivy as being a habitat for mosquitoes and the best method to get rid of ivy?
English ivy, the problem, I mean, it's very thick, it's very dense. So it's going to create an environment that kind of holds the moisture in the ground, and it's going to make things very cool. So that's a very attractive habitat for the mosquitoes during the heat of the day when they kind of want to get out of the heat. Removing them is kind of a lot of mechanical. You could try cutting them way back and covering them with cardboard and sheet mulch might get rid of some of them. Ivy tends to be very difficult to control once it gets established because you essentially have to remove the whole plant, the whole root, in order to keep it to coming back. So it could be it's usually going to be kind of a multi-year issue. And I certainly know in my yard, the birds drop the seeds and they pop up in different parts of the yard. So I'm constantly pulling them up. So it is, you know, a big challenge of eliminating the mosquitoes or the ivy. I mean, you could always go with a herbicide like glyphosate or something like that would, you know, at least get some control over it. It probably wouldn't be 100% effective.
Okay, we have a few more questions. I was a couple of questions related, asking if you can just put up your last slide before the question slide. Now, the next question is, are mosquitoes killed off during the cold season? How can they be killed during the cold season when they are hibernating?
Yeah, well, probably some of them get killed off during the cold season, but certainly, especially as we get warmer, more milder winters, more of them are probably surviving over winter. But that, you know, obviously they've evolved for this climate. So that's, you know, cold may control some of them a little bit, but again, we're getting increasingly fewer colder days. So
now, other than English ivy, are there other ground covers that we should avoid to, you know, so we don't create mosquito habitat?
I can't think of any other ground cover that comes to mind. Again, you know, supporting, you know, kind of soil health and kind of good agricultural practices is actually getting consistent ground cover is actually a key recommendation in using less mulch and using that kind of layered approach.
There's another question. It's a lemon balm like citronelle, lavender, not as effective, not an effective mosquito repellent.
No research to indicate that it's particularly effective. It smells nice if you want to burn it on your porch, but I actually suggest getting a fan if you're out on your deck or patio. It is going to be much more effective.
What about the Doug Tallamy's recommendation to fill a 5-gallon bucket with water and mosquito dunk and try to use that as a trap to lure the females to lay eggs and then?
Yeah, I mean, I think that actually is a good idea. It makes some sense. I don't know that it's actually been tested, but you know, if you're controlling water elsewhere on your property, and actually it's probably most effective if you can get much of your neighbors to do the same thing, is to create these essential traps. It's certainly worth trying.
Peggy, Sandro, ground cover, is that a problem? Is it in the same category as English ivy?
It could be. It's kind of similar, but again, I'd have to research that to see, you know, and how much research there may actually have been about, you know, what types of ground covers are particularly attractive. Yeah, there's a lot of good native ground covers. I just would kind of recommend that more, as much as native plants are important to put into our gardens.
Could you provide the brand names of the mosquito dunks?
I think that Mosquito Dunks is a brand name. Again, you're looking for anything that has BTI in it. that's the active ingredient. Okay, so we will now turn our attention to ticks. Again, something that is concerned for health reasons and just pure annoyances. We have several types of ticks that are particularly common. I'll talk a little bit about each one individually: the American dog tick, the Lone Star tick, brown dog tick, and the black-legged tick, which has often been referred to as the deer tick, although the more standard name is the preferred name is the black-legged tick. Most are active from April through September, but they can be active all year round. I'll actually show a slide later on that gives a little bit more detail on that. We have a couple of newcomers that are being seen within the state, which is the Asian longhorn tick, and they tend to be in fairly large size colonies. And I believe they actually can reproduce clonally. And then there's the Gulf Coast tick. Still not much about it, but kind of expect that they could be carriers of disease as well. So identifying ticks is important because different ticks carry different diseases. So kind of if you have been exposed, you might just be useful to know in case you develop ticks. But keep in mind that not all ticks carry it. Not all ticks are actually going to translate. But so there are certain parts of the tick that you look at. The first is the size. And again, I'll walk through these in more detail later. Any ornamentation on the ticks, what their mouth part looks like, and the anal groove. Because they're small, it helps to have a magnifying glass and a ruler. And there's a lot of good comparison pictures that you can get online to see the differences. Size is really important. All ticks are very small. The largest ticks run no more than 5 millimeters. Here you can see that the size is what we're talking about in terms of millimeters. And so it's just really the largest, and the deer tick is among the smallest, but even so, the others aren't that much larger. The nymphs and the small are much smaller. So, and the larvae are really small, so that they are hard and actually harder to identify as well. So we'll start with the long American dog tick. This will have kind of a scrotum here. It has a short mouthpiece. It's got this festoons here, and then the ornamentation around here. And with the dark wavy blooms, it runs about 5 millimeters. Again, you can see the difference with the Lone Star tick is it's got this longer mouthpiece. One of the more distinctive one is the females have this spot at the lower end of the scrotum. That's where it gets the name of the Lone Star tick is this thing. It's again has these festoons, light reddish color. So, and again, about 5 millimeters. The brown tick or the brown dog tick, again, about 5 millimeters, has a festoon, very short mouthpiece, doesn't have any white colors, again, a little wavy here. And then you have the longhorn tick, again, it's got short areas, festoon around here, somewhat nondescript, 3 to 5 millimeters. And then the Gulf Coast, longer mouthpiece, the scrotum, you can see is fairly distinctive. It's got the festoons, and then the ornamentation on the scale. And the deer tick is a slightly different species. It is the smaller, so the adults are going to only be about 2 to 3 millimeters long. The deer black-legged tick is actually the tick that carries Lyme disease. It has a longish blonde part. It's got this orangish part and scrotum with no festoons. And then the other thing is, if you turn over in the back, the black-legged tick, the deer tick, is going to have a groove over the anus on the top, whereas all the other species are going to have that groove on the bottom. So again, another distinguishing feature if you're trying to tell the difference between the different species. General life cycle is we've got the egg mass. They emerge as a sea tick, a larva, and then a nymph, an adult female, and then once they mate, the egg mass, and they repeat it over. At each part of the life cycle, the ticks need a blood meal in order to go on to the next stage. So again, this is kind of showing for the black-legged tick, and this can go over a course of a year or two as it goes through spring, summer. Most ticks, although the black-legged tick is actually can be most active during the winter time. Most of them will feed on smaller animals, birds, and during the larval stage. They're not targeting humans. Humans just, if they happen to pass by, it's the larger mammals that are more likely to be a target as they go from the nymph to the adult stage, and then actually before the female lays the eggs. So this gives you a good idea of what times of years when ticks are most active. Again, as I mentioned, the black-legged tick, it's the adult actually tends to be active during the winter months. In other cases, most of the activity is the April through September. You can see the different life cycles, nymph and then the adult have different periods of times when they're most likely to be active. So ticks are transmitting disease through the feeding process. And it can take minutes, even hours, for a tick to find a place. They're kind of usually looking for something that's nice and soft. And different ticks prefer different parts of the body, so that they might search before they actually attach. And then they're slow feeders, so it's can take several days for them to actually fully feed, so that they're in. And it usually takes some time for them to spread the pathogens. So, I mean, and they pick up pathogens from one animal and then transmit it into the other, like the Lyme disease, is picked up from mammals. Particularly, there's a deer mouse, I think, that's particularly prevalent in terms of carriers, but then we'll transmit it. And they're most active in Virginia from April through September. May, June, July is the time for most disease transmission. You can do some habitat management. I mean, if you keep the grass cut to, a decent length, doesn't have to be cut really low, because that's not necessarily good for the grass, and keep underbrush in the yard, especially areas that you may be sitting or playing in, cut low. They do not light and will not survive very long exposed to sunlight. So they actually really like to be within the leaf litter of areas. And then when they're ready for a blood meal, what they do is kind of climb up onto a grass blade or a weed or shrub and kind of wait for mammals or people to come by. And then we'll just crawl on as somebody brushes against the grass. So protecting yourself is the most effective way. You can wear light colored clothing. This doesn't actually keep the ticks away, but it actually makes them a lot easier to see. If you're wearing long pants, long sleeves, you can tuck your pants into your socks, so that will kind of prevent an opening for the ticks to actually find. It is important to kind of check yourself, and checking kids and pets every few hours when you're in areas that you're actually think that you may have some tick exposures. And then, one thing you can do is throw any of your clothing into a hot dryer. Washing in water doesn't necessarily kill the ticks, but the hot dryer is going to do that. So those are, the best strategies for actually managing ticks. And it's the same repellents that are effective against mosquitoes that work well against the of ticks as well. DEET 20 to 30%, Picardin 20%, oil of eucalyptus, and the Merck 35. You can treat closed boots and shoes with a insecticide, and then you can ask your veterinarian for controls for ticks. Some reported cases of toxicity to DEET, but it's fairly rare. So it's kind of important just to use it as little as possible, and then wash it off after you've come in outside. Make sure your concentrations are 30% or less. Don't use them on children, who are probably going to be most susceptible. And again, keep it out from palms, hands, anything that might actually get into the body, and wash off when you get in, just for as precautions. You can also then maybe use the lemon oil of eucalyptus, which is a natural component, which maybe even doesn't have any kind of issues as far as we know in terms of toxicity. So might be an alternative if you're concerned. You can use Permamone, and that's a permethrin. It's for clothes only. But you basically spray it on the clothes, give them a couple hours to dry, and then it will kill the any ticks that land on the clothing. It lasts for 2 weeks, even if you're laundering the clothing. So if you're outside in tick infested areas for a good bit of time, having clothing like this, and you can actually buy clothing that's been treated with permethrin. Pesticides are not going to be very effective, no matter what a company might tell you. They're just not going to be able to get the pesticides to where the ticks are habiting. I mean, they're going to be in the leaf litter, and that type of spray is not going to reach them. Plus, they're coming in from being carried in by mammals. It's going to be constant in and out, so it's really ineffective to expectly treat. And if you're treating grass, it's probably not particularly useful anyway, because the ticks aren't likely to live on grass because they're too exposed there to the sun, as long as you're keeping them mowed and cleaned up of leaf litter. So I'll stop now for questions.
First question is do tick larvae and nymphs transmit diseases as adults?
Yes, they can. Transmits through the different life cycles, so that they can pick it up, they can transmit.
Okay, I guess the next question is sort of related to the previous question. Are small ticks, nymphs, less likely to transmit because they have not been on an animal?
That's possible. I'd have to check into that. I don't know how much of that pathogens may actually be transmitted from the adults through the eggs. So it would be more the seed ticks that are the earliest ones. I've not heard anything specifically that says that they don't transmit.
Okay, the next question is, do you mix lemon oil and eucalyptus together, or should you use them separately?
That's actually a specific type of eucalyptus. So oil of lemon eucalyptus. So it's not a combination of lemon and eucalyptus. Read the active ingredients on any of the different repellents that are being sold, and they'll tell you what's being used.
You mentioned deer tick is most active in winter. Does that mean they can transmit the disease as well?
Yeah, if they're ready to bite and lay their eggs. So again, anytime you have a tick attachment, and again, if they are active during those periods, there's a potential for that. So you do have to be a little bit careful year round. Is
the tick that was carrying Lyme disease that has a red marking, what is it different from the non-Lyme disease carrying tick? Not all ticks will carry pathogens, but it's the black-legged or the deer tick that transmits Lyme disease. And I will talk a little bit later about the associations between different ticks and different pathogens of which they transmit. And that's where it becomes useful to know what kind of tick was bitten, just in case you start developing symptoms. Although honestly, just knowing that you might have been exposed to ticks and it's worth conveying to your doctor and let them do the appropriate tests. Is the oil of lemon eucalyptus preferred to the oil of eucalyptus? Yeah, usually we've been referred as oil of lemon eucalyptus. I would have to check. I don't know that there's again, it's a standard product that's been used, and it does test well. Once a tick is attached, how long does it take before the pathogen can be transmitted to the body? It can take several hours. I'll talk about that a little later.
So, but yeah, it depends on the disease, it depends on the tick. Make your own repellent.
Right.
I wouldn't recommend it because it's getting the right proportion of the active ingredients. So most of those are kind of synthesized products that have been most effective, the DEET and the Picaridin. And I would, recommend people check out the Consumer Reports assessment because they do find there's differences between whether it's a cream or it's a spray, and other ways of kind of applying it. So it's useful to know that information when you're looking at products. So if you've got a tick, again, if you're out in areas where you think you may be exposed, it's worth checking every few hours, or at least daily, or have somebody to check out areas that you can't see. If you do find a tick, what you want to do is take a kind of a very thin pointed tweezers and get down at the skin level and grasp it around the mouth and just pull up fairly gently with a steady upward motion to pull it out. Don't try to touch it with your bare hands. You don't want to crush it. Don't try using alcohol or fire. That's just going to make the tick mad. It's more likely that they're going to regurgitate. So it could increase potential of spreading pathogens. Removing within 24 hours is the most effective way of preventing pathogens from transmitting diseases. So, once you've removed the tick, treat it as any other wound and clean the area in your hands with soap, water, alcohol. Now you want to kill the tick is ideal. You can put it in alcohol. You can place it in a sealed bag or wrap it with tape. You can flush it down the toilet. Now, if you do that, do it very quickly because I understand they can move very quickly and kind of get out. So don't want to crush it with your fingers. If you want to ID it, you can take it to our offices. We don't want you bringing in live ticks, so put it in a Ziploc bag with some rubbing alcohol in it, or just in a small bottle, but cover it with alcohol so that it will kill the tick. And then you'll provide us with information on date and location, and we'll do our best. Sometimes it can be hard, especially if you're dealing with the sea ticks and the nymphs and the real small ones. It's hard to actually identify what the tick is. Don't worry about it too much, but if you start developing a rash or a fever, other symptoms, let your doctor know that you've had a tick bite when you see them, and they can do the appropriate test to determine whether it's a tick-borne disease. Tick-borne diseases are most common vector-borne illnesses, and unfortunately, given climate change, it's actually spreading. These ticks are moving further north into other populations, so they are, they can spread wherever you have ticks. In this country, they're most common in the Northeast, but they're really anywhere in the country that you can be exposed to ticks. So and we're getting lots of questions on that, is Lyme disease is spread by the deer tick or the black-legged tick. Researchers are differ in terms of how long it takes to transmit. It could be anywhere from 6 to 36 hours. Rocky Mountain spotted fever is another one that's somewhat common. Again, it's the American dog tick and the brown dog tick and the Lone Star ticks are all. And again, estimated ranges are fairly 2 to 20 hours. A number of different diseases. Somebody was asking about the alpha-gal. That's a red meat allergy. And it's the Lone Star tick that's known for transmitting that. And actually, they're transmitting the sugar in the proteins from an animal that they may have fed on when they again feed on a human. They transmit that, and the body responds as an allergic reaction, which can lead to this red meat allergy. I think there was an article in the Post about it not too long ago, so it's kind of on people's mind. Different diseases, different transmission times needed. Lyme disease, that seems to be among the more common of the tick-borne diseases. It's prevalent across the United States in 48 of the 50 states. It's the black-legged tick or the deer tick. Usually you will, but not always. There will be that oblong rash around the tick site. About 70% of the people develop that symptom. It does require transmission of 6 to 36 hours. You will, once the rash appears, you're likely to feel some flu-like symptoms, and some people will have, chronic symptoms if they're untreated that go on for quite long. And I think we've probably all heard of people that have had this people or know of people who have developed this kind of long-term Lyme disease issues. And so again, it's important just, if you're developing these types of symptoms to let the doctors know and they can treat it. And here's some pictures of what the rash might look like. Not all people will have the rash. In some cases, the rash may be in an area that you might not see. And Rocky Mountain fever is another one. This attachment of 4 to 6 hours. You're likely to start feeling fairly severe headaches, chills, and fever message within a few days. And then a red rash on the wrists and the ankles. And the doctor is usually going to need a blood test to confirm what the disease is. But it's very treatable. And there may be, other types of no rashes. Talk to your doctor, let them diagnose what the issue is. And keep in mind that your pets can get Lyme disease, and check them after they've been outside. And check with your veterinarian to see what kind of colors or sprays or powders you can get that help ticks from biting them. Look at their bedding and see if you see any ticks there. You can put the bedding in a hot dryer for at least 20 minutes. That will kill them off. Again, kind of summarizing, if you avoid contacts with, the higher grasses, leaves, and shrubs in areas where ticks are prevalent in wading, using repellent and where the appropriate clothing can be is very effective. And then just being observant and checking for and removing ticks, keeping an eye both on yourself, your kids, and your pets, making sure that the pets are protected. Few things you can do in your yard: isolating brush. I mean, we do tend to also encourage people to leave brush piles and kind of hidden parts of the yard as habitat for other creatures and help support native wildlife. So again, there's that balance there of what steps you take. And mulch or hardscape around patios or any areas that you're actually going to be playing and living in will help. The other final one is sometimes somewhat impractical of trying to discourage wildlife that carrying the ticks, and it's just kind of hard to keep them out. So a huge amount of resources out there. They can all be found on our website. Most of this information is summarized quite well in articles on our website. You can come to our office if you want help in IDing ticks. And that will be all that I have. So I'll take other questions as well.
Well, we have just a few questions. Can you pull up the slide where it shows all the diseases carried by ticks?
Sure.
Has cedar oil been proven as a tick repellent for the yard?
Again, probably unlikely. I don't think there's any research to indicate they will. Again, it's one of those essential oils. Most of these essential oils evaporate pretty quickly into the atmosphere once they've been exposed. So any potential repellent impact they have is likely to be pretty limited.
The next question is, this person says she found when she itches, she will find a tick there and she gets rid of the tick. Is there a way to determine if you have a tick, just to see if your skin itches?
Yeah, that's, kind of sometimes people can see that, or, just kind of rubbing your hand over, you can feel, or being aware and observant, then, you might have been exposed to ticks. It makes you more alert to what to look for. And they are very small, so it's easy to miss.
The next question is, do foxes carry ticks?
Yeah, again, the ticks are going to be attracted to mammals, so it's likely that they could pick up ticks in the same way humans can in other mammals. I know there's the deer mouse that seems to be particularly ones that attract ticks, particularly the black-legged tick. But any mammal pretty much can pick up ticks.
The next question is, what are the areas on your body that are more likely to have ticks than other areas?
Well, I think they tend to like to go for the softer areas, joint bends, up around the neck, underneath the arm. And I think different ticks are attracted to different types of locations.
What other animals carry ticks other than deer? We know fox.
Mice, fox, pretty much any mammals, possums, I think like to eat them. Anything that the tick is going to be attracted to, which would be pretty much any mammals. Again, they're not searching out and particularly targeting humans. We just often tend to be in the way.
Okay, next question is, are there any products that you are aware that are better as a body wash in the shower for washing off ticks?
I don't think there are any products that are necessarily going to wash off the ticks once they've attached. You're going to need to, again, use the tweezers and gently pull them out. The key thing is try not to do anything that might actually irritate them. So putting alcohol or fire or something to try to get them to disattach is more likely to cause them to regurgitate, and that probably and could possibly increase the transmission of pathogens. So, again, gently pull them out with tweezers is the best way of doing that. Appreciate everybody's time and attention. Hope this was useful for everybody.
That concludes our presentation, and thank you, Joan. That was very thorough and very well researched and just in time for the summer. And I also would like to thank Julie Hanson and Betsy Leon for co-hosting this event with me.